I need you to sit down with me for a minute, not because I want to scare you, but because I am 106 years old and I have watched too many good people, hardworking, loving, careful people, lose everything they built for their children, not to sickness, not to bad investments, not to some swindler at the door, but to a system they never bothered to understand. And if you think that cannot happen to you, then you are exactly the person this story is for. My name does not matter as much as what I have seen. I have outlived 2 husbands, a financial advisor who swore he knew everything, and more tax laws than I care to count. I have watched families cry at kitchen tables over documents they did not understand. I have held the hands of women who worked their whole lives, saved every penny they could, went without vacations so their children would not go without, only to discover, after they were gone, that the government took the lion's share. And their children? They got a fraction, sometimes less than that. This is not a story about blame. This is a story about what happens when good intentions meet an uninformed plan. And if you stay with me through all 3 parts of what I am about to share, I promise you will walk away knowing exactly what to do differently. What I wish someone had told the people I loved before it was too late. But before we go any further, I want to ask you something. If this kind of honest, plain-spoken conversation about money and retirement is what you have been looking for, please subscribe to this channel. Hit that button right now. Because what we talk about here is not the glossy version, it is the real version, the one your financial advisor might not tell you until after the damage is done. Now, let me tell you about Margaret. Margaret was 71 years old when she first told me about her plan. We were sitting on her back porch, the kind of August afternoon that makes you feel like summer will never end. She had a glass of sweet tea and a smile on her face that I will never forget. She said, "I have done it. I have finally done it. By the time I go, my kids are going to have everything they need." She had $890,000 in a traditional IRA. She had been saving into it since she was 32 years old, 40 years of discipline, 40 years of choosing retirement over everything else. She drove the same car for 11 years. She clipped coupons until her fingers were stained with newsprint. She never took a cruise. She said cruises were for people who did not care about their grandchildren. I admired her. I admired her so much. But here is what Margaret did not know. And here is what I need you to understand before anything else, because this is the foundation of every single mistake that comes after it. A traditional IRA is not a gift. It is a debt. Not your debt exactly, but when you leave a traditional IRA to your children, you are not leaving them $890,000. You are leaving them a tax bill. Every single dollar inside that account has never been taxed. The government has been patient. They have been very patient. But the moment your children inherit that money, the IRS steps to the front of the line. Under the rules that came into effect in 2020 with what is called the Secure Act, most non-spouse beneficiaries are now required to withdraw all inherited IRA funds within 10 years. That means your children cannot stretch those withdrawals out slowly over a lifetime the way they once could. They have to take it out. And when they take it out, every dollar is treated as ordinary income. Let me show you what that looks like in real numbers, because I want this to land for you the way it landed for Margaret's daughter Linda, when she sat across from a CPA 8 months after her mother passed. Margaret left $890,000 in her traditional IRA. She also had a small brokerage account worth about $60,000 and a house worth $180,000. She thought she was leaving her 2 children over $1 million. She told me so herself. Linda was a school teacher. She earned about $54,000 a year. Under the 10-year rule, she and her brother each inherited roughly $445,000 from the IRA. If they spread the withdrawals evenly, that is $44,500 per year added to their existing income. For Linda, that pushed her from her normal tax bracket up into a much higher one. She went from paying about 22% on her income to paying 32% on a significant portion of it. Over 10 years, federal taxes alone consumed more than $140,000 of her share. And that does not include state income taxes, which in her state were not nothing. Her brother was a dentist. He earned over $200,000 a year. For him, the inherited IRA withdrawals were taxed at the highest ordinary income rates. He lost more than half of his share to various taxes by the time all was said and done. Together, Margaret's 2 children received, after taxes, somewhere in the neighborhood of $520,000 from an account their mother believed was worth $890,000. Nearly $370,000 went to federal and state governments. Margaret never knew. She died in her sleep 2 years after that August porch conversation. She died peacefully, which I am grateful for. She died believing she had taken care of her family. Linda cried for the money, yes. But what broke her heart was something else entirely. She said, "My mother gave up so much for that money. She never treated herself to anything. And now I feel like she sacrificed all of that for nothing." That is the part that stays with me. That is the part that made me decide I needed to talk about this. Now, before I move on, I want to ask you something directly. Are you holding a traditional IRA right now? Are you planning to leave it to your children? If so, I need you to stay for the next chapter because I am going to tell you exactly what Margaret could have done differently, and I promise it is not complicated. It just required knowing. When I was a young woman, my grandmother used to say, "The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today." I did not fully understand what she meant until I was well into my 50s. But I understand it now more deeply than ever, and I want to pass it on to you with every bit of urgency I have left in me. Margaret's story did not have to end the way it did. There were things she could have done, legal things, simple things. Things that thousands of families are doing right now to protect what they have built. And the earlier you do them, the more powerful they become. The first and most important strategy Margaret never used is called a Roth conversion. A Roth IRA is the opposite of a traditional IRA in one beautiful, critical way. The money inside a Roth IRA has already been taxed, which means when your children inherit it, they owe nothing to the federal government on those withdrawals. Nothing. A Roth IRA inherited by a non-spouse beneficiary still follows the 10-year rule under the Secure Act, but because the money grows and comes out tax-free, the impact on your children's lives is completely different. Here's what that looks like. If Margaret had begun converting portions of her traditional IRA into a Roth IRA when she was in her late 60s, before she started taking required minimum distributions at age 73, she could have moved money into a Roth during years when her income was relatively low. She would have paid taxes on the converted amount at her rate, which was modest because she was living simply and her income was not high. But every dollar she moved into that Roth account would have then grown tax-free, and her children would have inherited every single one of those dollars without handing a cent to the IRS. The math is not subtle. If Margaret had converted even $300,000 over a 10-year period, paying taxes herself at a lower rate during her retirement, she might have saved her children over $100,000 in taxes. That is $100,000 that would have stayed in her family, honoring 40 years of sacrifice. Now, I want to be fair with you here because I did not survive 106 years by being reckless with the truth. Roth conversions are not free. You pay taxes at the time of conversion. That means you are paying a bill earlier than you would otherwise have to. But here is the key insight that took me years to understand and that I want to hand to you directly. It is almost always better to pay taxes at your rate in retirement when your income is lower than to force your children to pay taxes at their rate when they are in their peak earning years and their rate is higher. You are not avoiding taxes with a Roth conversion. You are choosing who pays them and when. And that choice, made wisely, can mean the difference between a real inheritance and a heartbreak at a kitchen table. The second strategy Margaret never used is something called strategic gifting during her lifetime. In the United States, there is a rule called the annual gift tax exclusion. For 2024, it allowed any individual to give up to $18,000 per year to any other individual without triggering gift tax or even requiring a gift tax return. That means Margaret, every single year of her retirement, could have given each of her children $18,000 tax-free. She could have given $18,000 to each grandchild, too. Over a decade, for a family of her size, that adds up to hundreds of thousands of dollars that would have transferred out of her taxable estate and into the hands of the people she loved, completely free of the complications that came later. She did not know she could do that. Nobody told her. And the third thing, perhaps the hardest thing to talk about, but the most important, is this. Margaret never had a real estate plan. She had a will. A lot of people have wills and think that is enough, but a will does not avoid probate. It does not minimize estate taxes if your estate is large enough to trigger them. It does not give you control over how your IRA is structured or who the beneficiaries are because IRAs pass outside of a will entirely. They pass by beneficiary designation, which means the name you wrote on a form when you opened that account decades ago is the name that controls everything. Do you know who is listed as the beneficiary on your IRA right now? Do you know if that person is still alive? Do you know if their circumstances have changed in ways that might make an inherited IRA devastating for them specifically? Margaret had named her first husband on her IRA beneficiary form in 1987. He passed away in 2001. She never updated the form. When her estate went through probate, the lack of a named beneficiary meant the IRA had to pass through her estate directly, which triggered a different and more compressed tax timeline than even the 10-year rule. These are the invisible landmines buried in the plans of people who thought they had done everything right. I have been sitting here long enough to watch the world change more times than most people think is possible. I watch television come into living rooms. I watch the internet change everything my grandchildren thought they understood about money. I watched retirement accounts become the cornerstone of American savings, and then I watched the tax code wrap itself around those accounts in ways that most people still do not fully see. Here is what I want you to take away from everything I have shared with you today, said plainly, from one person who has lived long enough to see how the story ends. Your money is not your legacy. Your plan is your legacy. The people who leave real inheritances are not always the ones who saved the most. They are the ones who understood how their savings would be treated after they were gone. They are the ones who sat down, sometimes uncomfortably, sometimes with numbers that made their hands shake, and asked the right questions before it was too late to act on the answers. I want to give you those questions right now, because I believe in being specific. First question, is the bulk of my retirement savings in a traditional pre-tax account? If yes, you need to talk to a CPA or a fee-only financial planner about Roth conversion strategies. Not someone who earns a commission, someone who charges you a flat fee for their time and has no incentive to sell you anything. Sit down with them and run the numbers. What is your current marginal tax rate? What rate would your children pay on inherited withdrawals? If their rate is higher, you have a conversion opportunity. Second question. When did I last update the beneficiary designations on every financial account I own? Not just my IRA, my 401k, my life insurance, my pension if I have one. These designations override your will. An out-of-date form can send your money to an ex-spouse, to a deceased person's estate, or nowhere at all. This is one of the simplest things to fix, and one of the most commonly ignored. Third question. Am I making full use of annual gifting? If you have grandchildren, children, or other loved ones you want to support, giving money during your lifetime can be a powerful tool. Not just for your estate plan, but for the joy of seeing people you love benefit from your generosity while you are still here to share it with them. At my age, I can tell you that watching someone thrive because of what you gave them is a far richer experience than imagining it. Fourth question, have I actually talked to my children about what I am leaving them? I mean really talked to them, not just said, don't worry, you'll be taken care of, but sat down and explained the accounts, the beneficiary forms, the location of every document they will need. Margaret never had that conversation. Linda did not even know what an IRA was until she was grieving and sitting in a CPA's office and being told the numbers. The silence we keep around money in families is not kindness. It is a kind of abandonment. Your children cannot advocate for themselves, cannot prepare, cannot make smart decisions with what you leave them if they do not know what is coming. Fifth question, do I have a trust? Not everyone needs a trust, but for people with significant assets, with complicated family structures, with children who have special needs, or with strong preferences about how and when money is distributed, a revocable living trust can be an incredibly powerful tool. It avoids probate. It gives you control. It allows for nuance that a simple will cannot provide. Talk to an estate planning attorney. Not the same attorney who handled your house purchase 20 years ago. Someone whose practice is dedicated to estate planning and who can look at your full financial picture. I want to close by telling you something that I have held in my heart for a very long time, something that comes not from a textbook, but from a life that has been longer and fuller than I ever expected it to be. The most generous thing you can do for the people you love is not to leave them money. It is to leave them clarity. Clarity about what you have, clarity about where it is, clarity about what you intended, and clarity about the mistakes you already knew about and took the time to correct, so they would not have to absorb the cost of your unawareness on top of their grief. Margaret was generous. Margaret was loving. Margaret was disciplined in ways I have rarely seen in anyone, but she left her children confusion instead of clarity, and that confusion cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars and more than a little heartbreak. You do not have to make that same mistake. You have something Margaret did not have when she was sitting on that porch. You have this conversation. You have these words. You have time if you will use it. Do not let the comfort of thinking you have a plan stop you from actually examining whether your plan does what you believe it does. Ask the questions. Update the forms. Have the conversation. Make the appointment. Because the work of a lifetime deserves an ending that honors it. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own accounts and your own family in a new way, please subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone you love who needs to hear it. Not because I need the numbers, but because this information changes things, real things, dollar amounts, family dynamics, the way someone is able to live after you are gone. And if you have a story of your own about an inheritance that got complicated, about a tax bill nobody saw coming, about a lesson learned too late or just in time, I want to hear it. Leave it in the comments. We learn from each other here. We always have. I am 106 years old. I have seen a lot. And the thing I have seen most clearly is this. The people who are okay always are the ones who refuse to look away. Do not look away.